This is Unbranded Christianity, and today we're talking about used book theology. What does that mean? Stay tuned, and you'll find out. Used book theology. Go back to high school, go back to college. In high school, where I came from, every year you got the previous grade's book, and you got to open it up, and you got to sign your name in it because that was your book for the year. And in doing so, you got to see who came before you. And in college, same type thing. You go to the bookstore, you don't want to spend new book money, so you buy an old used book. You save some money. It's great. Used book theology is this concept that theology scaffolds. So think you have to paint the ceiling, and the ceiling is 30 feet tall. You scaffold up to where you could paint. Also, you can think about education. You start by learning the numbers, and then you add 1 plus 1, and then you do subtraction, and then you do division and multiplication. You scaffold off of your education. Used book theology is the fact that we don't start in chapter 1. We are born in the 1900s, the 2000s, and what happens is we've been handed a book. We've been handed a tradition. We've been handed what has become to be your standard teachings. And ultimately, it's a used book. It has history. It has chapters. It's been scaffolding for centuries. But when we're handed those things, oftentimes the scaffold or what's been previously highlighted becomes the focus. So I personally always struggled with a used book or a someone who's highlighted in a book before me, because inevitably when I go to that page, I see someone else's process. I see someone else's values. I see something that stuck out to someone else. And that's the used book. I always struggled with that. I always struggled with not being able to not focus, not being able to do anything but focus on another person's highlights, underlines, etc. And in doing so, that became what I studied. Even though I might know that, I might need to study on something differently. Again, thinking in terms of school. So, what happens in our walk with Jesus as we follow him is we are handed a used book, and this is the on-ramp to theology, and then we start to go back through and we start to read again, and the things that are already highlighted become our focus. But as we go through life, and as we time and time again encounter new situations, maybe the previous highlights are insufficient for us in today's time. And maybe there are other pieces of the theology that we actually personally need to turn and focus on so it better forms who we are. So with the used book theology, it's really easy to focus on what was previously important and negate or neglect what's actually going on in our lives. So as we approach different thoughts, principles, teachings, I encourage you to take a step back, look at what has been highlighted for you already, examine it, get to the heart of what's there, and then in turn, try to go get a new book, a different book, a different version, and begin to read again with fresh eyes to deconstruct what you've been taught and what you've been scaffolded on, and to begin to reconstruct based off of what the Lord is speaking to you today and now. Used book theology, very simple concept, but that's what we've been handed in Christianity is someone else's study, someone else's process and journey. And sometimes that's groups of people, sometimes that's individuals. And it's not all bad. Don't hear me say it's all bad. But what I am saying is unhighlight, ununderline the things that were handed to us. Re-examine, reapproach, and see what sticks out to you today. An example of this that happened to me recently, I was going back and rereading through the book of Matthew in the first time in quite a while, and something struck me in Matthew 9, verses 13, before and after. Jesus is eating with the sinners, and the Pharisees come and say, "Why are you doing this?" to his disciples. And Jesus says, "I desire mercy and not sacrifice." And in the context of a Christianity where everything has to be buttoned up, and it's so easy to slide into Christianity where everything's buttoned up, you dress up, you go to a service, you worship for 2 hours, and you're buttoned up, you're pretty for 2 hours. It's really easy to see how you can take a step back and say, man, Jesus desires mercy and not sacrifice. He desires the broken and not the show, you know. And that to me stood out. So a way of approaching this is literally to begin to ask the question, what lenses do I have as I approach Scripture? What lenses do I have as I go back and pursue Jesus? Sometimes what we do is we're not aware of how we approach things. And most recently, as I began to read in Scriptures again, I started to realize how much work is needed to be to accurately understand what's actually taking place in Scriptures. The leisurely stroll through the Bible in a year, read the Bible in a year, or go after consuming as much as possible, I think is good for a time. But the reality is the more you read Scripture and the more you study Scripture and what goes on in there, and actually listen to people who have dedicated their lives to writing books and studying the historical, the actual people who lived in the history, and having that be accurate, the more you'll recognize that what is there can't be blazed through, can't be just consumed without deep, hard work. So, with used book theology, I just want it to be an easy analogy for you to think through that you can take to any part of your walk with Jesus and think to yourself and think aloud and even ask Jesus himself, what am I bringing to this that was handed to me? And does this need to change? Do I need to take a step back and relearn how to encounter Jesus in new ways in this way that I've always learned? I encourage you that with each one of us, we've been handed a used book. And I encourage you to take the time to drill into what you've been taught, what you've learned, and how it's formed you, and to really test how solid it is, and whether or not you need to deconstruct and reconstruct, or patch a few holes in the wall. So I hope this is encouraging. If this doesn't apply to you, it's not going to make sense at all. If you're in this place, you're just beginning this journey of restructuring your faith in Jesus, and going and doing the hard work on that. I hope this is encouraging, and I hope it's helpful to think of it in terms of You've been handed a history. You've been handed a book, a used book that has underlines and highlights, and to go through and re-examine what's been highlighted for you and what can be different, what hasn't been highlighted, and what can become a focus for you as you, with fear and trembling, work out your faith. Yeah, that's it. I hope this helps. I hope this is encouraging. I hope this helps set a framework where you can go and do the heavy lifting as you pursue Jesus. Yeah, have a good one. And thank you so much for joining us on Unbranded Christianity. Again, my name is Matthew, and I'm super thankful you're here. I'm doing this to encourage and to help, and I hope that it does those two things: encourages you and helps you. Thank you so much, and have a good one.